I want to turn this over again to my friend Tom Althouse, who wrote the Immortals, which became the Matrix and a few other movies, the Matrix trilogy, and now they're going to make what? 2 others?
Altered Carbon right now is out. Altered Carbon.
Which is also from this same script.
That's right. Yeah, Altered Carbon, actually, they say the premise behind Altered Carbon is that the rich in the future, the wealthy, have immortality, and then that the poor are used as pawns for like genetic material and things like this and are not granted immortality. And that's exactly what the story treatment that I submitted back in 1993 says. So they're claiming that it's the Matrix 4, the only thing that's really close to the Matrix and the new installment of the Matrix. And they're claiming that's the greatest sci-fi concept ever made. Well, according to the acting director and specialist here who submitted this work and was courageous enough to do this for me, it shows that this is in here. This is all in here. So that's exactly what Altered Carbon, if they're saying it's identical to the Matrix and is the Matrix, then the Warner Brothers people cannot claim, and the Wachowskis, Joel Silver and these guys, cannot claim there's no similarities, because that's actually exactly my work. And so, yeah, it's interesting that the title is The Immortals, and they were claiming this is the Matrix work. The fact is that Dino De Laurentiis, who discovered the Wachowskis, or worked with them so closely, actually copyrighted the title. He copyrighted the title The Immortals, and that's online in the Copyright Office. You can find that. And you'll see that entry in 1996 where something really interesting occurs. When I come forward in 1996 and to Hollywood to work, and I do another copyright on my script, suddenly what happens is Dino De Laurentiis, in July 1996, when I'm out there in Hollywood, July 1996, Dino De Laurentiis and Laurentiis Films pulls their names off the copyright of The Immortals title, not the body of work. And they go ahead and put it in the ownership of 2 of the top Jewish financing firms in Hollywood and a Netherlands bank. And so I'll have to look it up again. It's actually online in the Copyright Office. It can be looked at. Anybody right now can just zoom into the copyright website, look up The Immortals, and you'll see it there. Look for 1996 Immortals, and you'll see it. And you'll see my entry too. And so what's interesting is that what alerted the Copyright Office was they were copyrighting a title with no body of work. So what was made known to me was that they were going to substitute my script into their copyright slot, because these are hard copy slots, right? So an empty slot for them with Dino De Laurentiis, who's working with the Wachowskis, with my title, and the subsequent titles that whoever they gave it to steal might apply. Now, there's a whole list of these titles that they're listing in as possible substitutions for the Immortals when they get a writer to take it. And that's interesting because by putting in the hands or the ownership, by putting it in the ownership of the 2 investment firms, what they're doing then with also copyrighting a list of titles is that anybody that takes the work and wants to steal their version of this work, so let's say Joe's a Hollywood producer or something, and he wants to steal off of this, and everyone knows this is available to take. And so he gets it, and he names it Bird in the Bush. And that title might be on that list of titles. And since he's taking it from the investment firm, they're making a profit off of letting him steal it, and they're getting a gain. He's protected because they claim they own the rights. And so it's a perfect setup to steal material by putting it in the investment firm's name. So what's interesting, the Copyright Office finds out.
Well, that's a scam that's been done. You set up an empty trust with nothing in it, and then you sell rights to it, or you start selling, saying, oh, well, we got this trust, and you swindle people because there's nothing in the trust. But you're selling, people think they're buying something, and there's nothing there. A point I'd like to make about this is, all across this country, intellectual property is being stolen like crazy, especially on the internet. I want to bring in about, about Paula. Paula, for many years, put up stuff on YouTube under Paula Gloria. She's done probably a couple thousand shows and put them up on the internet. Now, the way to steal Paula's and cut Paula out of what's her rightful intellectual property is YouTube now says, oh, you can't come on. She always did it as Paula Gloria. That was her name and how she accessed all her stuff. Now they come in and they say, you can't use Paula Gloria anymore. You have to use Paula Gloria, Paula/Gloria.
I had to use my email address in the case of YouTube.
Oh, she had to use her email address, which now, since she can't access it under her normal Paula Gloria, she has been cut out of all her intellectual property, where she used to be able to go on and if someone had commented on one of her shows, she could, let's say they said, oh, I really liked your show, and what was the meaning of this? Well, then she could go on as Paula Gloria and answer them and say, oh, that was the meaning of this, or that's what this was about. But now she can't even access her own stuff. And this is happening.
Joe, can I make another comment and elaborate on that?
Okay, let me just finish. This is happening all over the country to people where they're being shut out of their intellectual property. They're being ripped off of their intellectual property. Okay, make your point, Paula.
Okay, my point is it's not just YouTube. When I tried to use e-courts, and this gets back to the court system, I couldn't use my name that I had already used before, Paula Gloria. Somebody had come in and changed the password, and I had proof of it. And this is a sequence of events that I also used in the Woodstock lawsuit with Birds of a Feather. I know it's significant. So it's that YouTube created traffic for the name Paula Gloria. But even that name was inaccessible to me when I was trying to use other internet instruments, such as e-courts. That's when I realized how flaky e-filing is. I just wanted to put that in.
Okay, and what's happening with Tom here is not the only thing. He's not the only person who's been ripped off of their intellectual property. This is, and it's time. All you people out there in television land, when Tom eventually we're going to put this stuff up on the internet, and they're going to try to shut it down because they don't want this information getting out. So when we finally put this up on the internet, we ask all you people to download it and send it out, resend it out again, so that they can't shut it down. We're fighting a battle. Tom's fighting a battle, and we're with him on this battle to preserve the rights of the people who create intellectual property. You know, if Tom wins this battle and proves that they're stealing intellectual property, and it's going to be a win for all the people who have intellectual property that's being denied them, that's being kept from them, or being swindled from them. Mm-hmm. Would you like to add to that, Tom?
Absolutely. It's really a concerted effort. Writers are coming together and hoping to help one another. I've been helped by the one writer of Kill Bill. I talked to a lady who wrote Gravity. Different people have been ripped off. We've contacted each other at different times. And there's a lot of us. And in my case, I'm the first one in film history, apparently, where I can do a lot of good, and I have a responsibility on my shoulders, I feel, because I'm one of the first to have my personal information inserted in the films themselves. Thank goodness the Wachowskis are clowns and known for being clowns, because what they did was they tried to be quite clever. And if fans of The Matrix can check this out, because I want you to actually critically think this through and take a look to see if I'm actually lying or is this some kind of person looking for attention. But let's actually look at the facts. If you go to The Matrix, if you have a copy, go to it and go to the interrogation scene and freeze frame when Smith lays down the file and opens it, and take a look at the first page. Now, that's going to be a split second. Just backtrack it or track it forward to make sure you get a clear copy. And there may still be a turn in the page. But on that page, you're going to see July 22nd. You'll see Thomas A. You're going to see John A. You'll see Central West High. Central West High is my high school. July 22nd is what was considered my birthday at the time, and I'll explain that. John A. is my dad's name, listed as Neo's dad. Thomas A. is my name, Thomas A. listed as Neo. And on that, what's interesting is, please look at this and see for yourselves, because I know this is going to be first sneezed at, coughed at, and just mocked at first. But critical thinking, let's wake up and take a look. And so what happens is Michelle McGahee, you're going to see listed as Neo's mom on that document. And you're going to see Owen Patterson listed as the other school. You're probably looking at that. Well, Owen Patterson is the production manager. Michelle McGahee is the art director. That completed the joke. And what's interesting is, in the only testimony we ever got from the Wachowskis, as this case was just railroaded through the first time, the Wachowskis blame Michelle McGahee and Owen Patterson's departments for those entries, see, about me. They don't negate them. They don't say it's not true. They just say that basically Tom's bio information was put by these members of our staff who were on the film team. Well, that says something interesting. It's there. Then in Animatrix, and please do this if you're able to, if you have a copy of Animatrix, open it up, put it on, go to the detective story. If you freeze frame the clock in the detective story, you're going to see the hands pointing to specific numbers. Those numbers are 7, 2, and you'll see the second hand pointing 1 before the 60. Now what's interesting is my birthday is 7/2/59. And that, I don't know who's going to even dare to argue that as a coincidence, especially with the matchups in the Matrix. And the way I know this is because I was contacted by somebody from the story department who wanted to be anonymous, a gentleman, who informed me this was here. He thought that would be the bomb that would blow it open, and everybody would get the idea that, this is what it is.
Paula wants to add something.
Could that have been insiders wanting to give you the real credit? Is that another interpretation?
I believe that's what it was. The way the gentleman talked, he was very sympathetic. He said the Wachowskis hate you. You're not getting your fair shot, this kind of thing, and I want to inform you. I hope to make a difference for you. And he said that the reason the Wachowskis are putting this in there is because they hate you, Tom. They don't understand the work. They don't even know what they're working with. They're just doing it for the fame and money to save their career.
Do you think maybe they didn't even know it was put in, and it was just somebody trying, a real artist saying, we know who it is?
From what this gentleman said, it was put there on purpose. So what's interesting is, that was there. And unfortunately, audiences didn't catch on. It just went away like a puff of smoke. No one caught on. No one raised an alarm. No one said, hey, all this guy's information's in there. In the detective story also, you have a scene, a graphic, which was a lot of money to make, apparently, because Joel Silver actually promoted his graphic designer who did this series of graphics to top position right-hand man. And what happens is you have my name across the screen, and they try to do it clever again. So what they do is to try to get around copyright law, they have the antique shop is turned into the antique house, where my last name has house, and they put T-O-M at different levels, but lined up perfectly. If you bring them up and raise them, they line up perfect to Tom Park Althouse. And in fact, they put Mopar in the background to make my middle name. So one way you turn it, it looks like Tom. The other way you turn it, it looks like Park with a little instant of a K. What's interesting is this was made known to me, and Animatrix, the reason you have Animatrix, this hodgepodge of sequences, is because, as Joe said, when they got my screenplay, many Matrix fans will know they made a 600-page storyboard. Images that actually they thought were cool. All these images come from my screenplay. So they lifted all these images like the field of pods, train station scene with little girl, squiddies, jacks to the back of the neck, which the writers said they wanted to do for real, identical figures at the end, the little girl pointing at the sun. These are all from this work the Copyright Office provides, which predates the Matrix. All right? So it really should be a hands-down win. And so they lift these images, and it's like chop shopping a Porsche. They rearrange them, as Joe says, and it doesn't hold together. It's not congruent. Now, what's interesting is you have their attorneys saying, well, it is one congruent piece. The Wachowskis wrote it in 92, 93. They didn't even have a title for it until 96. And that it was seamless. Now, if you look at the interviews, and fans of The Matrix will know that in interviews, Joel Silver and the Wachowskis claim that it was not meant to be one seamless piece, that there's supposed to be three different, totally different, spiritually different developed pieces that meant totally different things. So it's supposed to be disconnected. Well, nice try to cover the butt. But the thing is that the Wachowskis actually have an article where they say we're dried up as writers. We're going to have to pack our bags, literally quote, pack our bags and leave Hollywood because we failed as writers. That's in 1995. And then what happens is they say the only way we can, an article comes out where they're having an interview. And the gentleman asks them, what's next after Demolition or Bound? And they say, we're hoping to do Carnivore or Plastic Man, right? And they say that's actually the work they're peddling today still. They're still trying to get this made, Carnivore and Plastic Man. And no one wants it, right? Carnivore is about rich people being eaten, and Plastic Man's about a gentleman who defecates radioactive material. Not something I'd write, but they have a real love of this. And so they couldn't get it made. And so the interviewer says, the interview shows that, in the interview it shows them saying, well, we're hoping to do Plastic Man or Carnivore. Then it says pause. On the actual transcript, it has the bracketed pause. Then it says, we're hoping to be given the science project. There was no title, no copyright on the Matrix, only my title, because they did not have a title chosen for whoever was going to, or didn't have picked who's going to steal it. The first pick to take my work was actually the lady who wrote the Heidi Chronicles, a playwright on New York, a Broadway scene, not a film screenwriter. And the Wachowskis really scrambled and yelled and screamed and fussed to get the rights to the Immortals. And we know this from an interview where the author of the article actually says, I heard them screaming in the next room, they can't do that, right, when this decision was being made. So in 1995-96, they're upset with Warner Brothers because what happened was they did Assassins, right? They're trying to prove they can make it as directors. And what happened was they had to bring another writer in to finish the work. So the Wachowskis want out of Warner Brothers. They want their name off the work. They want to be out. They go all the way to the Writers Guild West, and this is well documented online, and fans should know. And the Writers Guild says, no, you got to stay. You got to finish your contract. So now they claim, and Joel Silver they claim that that's when they presented the science project or Matrix to Joel Silver in 1995. So the question is, if you're fed up with the studio and you're having a fight with them over ruining your career and having someone else finish your writing, and then you go all the way to the Writers Guild to fight them, you're threatening litigation, why would you then say you're giving your best work? It doesn't make any sense to that studio. Why not go to another one? So what's interesting is, what really happens is that's when Joel Silver gives them a test, a audition piece, and fans may know of this, the audition piece they call it, Bound. So they're given Bound to see if they can direct. If they direct it well, they'll be given the science project, code name for my work, one of the many code names, the Immortals. And keep in mind that De Laurentiis copyrighted the Immortals title, no body of work. So they're waiting to insert the actual script in there at the Copyright Office, the Immortals, once they give it to whoever they're going to give it to, with also a copyright on those different variations of titles possible. So what happens is they're given Bound, and what the Wachowskis do, they name the lead character Violet. Now, that does mean something to me because my grandmother's name is Violet. They name Neo Thomas A. They do a double name on a character. Very interesting. My name is Thomas A. So what's interesting is then you got that graphic in the first thing in the Matrix with being started in 1996, being written, aired in 1999. And there's all my stats, including my high school, which they blame on their staff. So really, if you actually brought this to court with due process, as Joe was talking about, due process and fair play, it's hands down. It's hands down. There's no way to wiggle out of this. This happened. There's no copyright in the Matrix story. So where we stand right now is a long journey of a nightmare where, of course, being the second one to claim it, since the Wachowskis were claimed first, I didn't know anything was being stolen at first. It's a hard road. Fans are locked into thinking Wachowskis wrote it, even though they said in the article they were washed up as writers, that they had to leave Hollywood, and they were hoping to give them the science project. Even though they're still pushing Plastic Man and Carnivore. And even though they started doing galas and interviews initially, and then said that they're shy and they didn't want to do interviews anymore. And that's because of the Christian content in the piece. They were at an actual article indicates a transcript of a session where they were answering a gala initially on, and were honoring their responsibilities for galas and appearances. And someone near the end asked, well, what about the Christian messages in the Matrix story? They're obviously there. At that point, you see Larry on the transcript, who's the leader of the two, basically, spokesperson, saying, we're going to stop there. Then soon after, they said they wanted their contract not to answer questions. And Joel Silver says in an article, the boys were shy. They didn't want to answer. They were embarrassed to explain what it meant. Well, if you're a writer worth your salt, you'll explain. And I'm willing to explain any time. What I want to do right now is just show something interesting. This is the sealed from the Copyright Office. And if I open to any of these pages, basically, there's 199 matchups. What the Wachowskis did was they lifted every image they thought was cool, made it into a storyboard through Japanese artists and others that they liked and were honored to work with. And so they make a 600-page storyboard. Fans know that. In that is all the cool shots to be chop-shop, like chop-shopping a Porsche, and put into something they hope would fall together. Well, right here on this very page, number 74 in the screenplay of my work that precedes The Matrix, you'll see the train station scene. And in the train station scene right here, you're going to see that on the next page, that a mother is trying to push her daughter forward into the program for a better life. And she can't follow because she's part of the short lifers outside the program, right? And so what's happening is she's going to give up her daughter, hopefully for a better life, by putting her with the Neo character to a better life in the Matrix, the Immortals program. And so this thing is filled with these scenes and images they thought were cool. And so they make no sense of it. And the real telling sequence I think that we can point out is, as it came to wrapping up the Matrix trilogy, first of all, when the Matrix was done, they thought that was it. We saved Keanu Reeves' career. We gave a whole new people and staff a whole new start as newbies on crew and tech. We also saved the Wachowskis' career. So they thought that was it. But people loved the Matrix so much, then they had to do the second and third. Little known to people, the attorneys for Warner Brothers actually we have it on tape, saying there's no working drafts. There's none. They used my script and then the storyboard and tried to make it happen. Well,
couldn't have Discovery.
Right. It's like no Discovery at all. No, they didn't let me have. That's why they said we couldn't have Discovery, right? Because there's nothing to discover, they claimed. So a moot point to ask, which is insane. Not having anything would be Discovery.
Explain that.
That was in court. When you go to court, if you want to prove something, you ask for the other side for discovery. Like in this case, he would say, I want discovery. I want to see your working draft of your screenplay. Well, if they had written it, they would be able to supply the screenplay as written by, if Tom hadn't written it, and they're saying, by some other writer. Well, when Tom went to court and asked for it, they didn't have it. Mm-hmm. And he was denied, the judge denied him access, said, oh, you can't ask for that. Now, that's a denial of due process. Any person fighting in court should be able to ask, I want, what's the word again?
Disclosure.
I want discovery material, and they're supposed to supply it. Since Tom wanted discovery, and his own lawyer said, well, we don't need it, or
I'm not going to allow it.
Or we're not going to allow it. We're not going to ask for it.
Yeah, he's provided. Yeah.
Then it's obvious that the lawyer that was supplied for Tom was there to sabotage his case. So fraud happened in Tom's case, and fraud should open the door for a new case.
Yeah, I was provided an attorney who came to me on Maui, and his name was Anthony Rankin. Good last name. And what happens is he comes to me and says he's going to put $100,000 into our case. He's got goosebumps. He's a fan of The Matrix. I didn't even know who he was at first. And he's saying that he wants to represent me and all this stuff. I wasn't even planning to have a case. And so then he says that he's going to get another copyright expert attorney, spend the money on that out of the $100,000 he's going to contribute, and making a deal basically too good to refuse. And there's a lot more to that. But what happens is we find out his license is suspended in California, and he goes ahead and does it there. And that he's classmates with lead attorney of Linda Burrows of Warner Brothers. In fact, before we even got started, he takes a trip to California and comes back and says, oh, I ran into the attorney who's going to be representing Warner Brothers. She's a classmate of mine. So they paid for him to go out there. He comes back with a new staff that they provided. It's just insane. They have a total makeover of the offices. Anyway, it was a total deal where all discovery was prevented, disclosures, altering some of the evidence, things like that. A real nightmare where no due process was given, ploy after ploy, and so we have a chance on fraud of the court on that too. What I want to do right now, and I thank Joe for bringing that up, is on page 5, I want to show you something else from this document. This might be interesting to fans of The Matrix also. Keep in mind that the Wachowskis are lifting images they think are cool from the original script and then shopping it into, a reorganized new kind of screenplay for themselves. Down at the bottom here, you're going to see the field of pods. The field of pods comes from the architect bringing back his top 100 on test subjects called secondaries here. And you have one at a time being brought out like Neo was in his cryogenic container. And so a field of pods where one by one they're convulsing, coming back and coughing up and choking and being brought back. And that's kind of interesting that that's where the field of pods come from. And so they took that image they thought was cool and said, let's make it about battery power, which is really interesting. And that's not what it was intended to be. And as the author of the original work here, I'm saying if you want to do battery power with a field of pods, thinking my image is cool and using it for that and altering it that way, then have cows hooked up. You don't have to worry about free will, and you get more power off of them. So solve your problem. Because what they were interested in my screenplay is the idea that free will matters. And what if you're an architect in the program, and the idea of the balance of the equation they kept babbling about between the architect, the oracle, and also Neo, and critics actually said it's one of the 11th worst sequels of all time because they just babble. Well, that's because they had my screenplay on set and also the visual storyboard, and they thought they could cleverly make it seamlessly happen off of that. In fact, Joel Silver in 2003 after the shootings goes, I hope we used up the rest of the story. I hope it'll tie together. If you're spending millions of dollars as a Hollywood company on a screenplay, you're going to be sure it ties together before you start shooting and paying the union wages. You're not going to get a whole team together and start shooting and hoping it falls together. And that shows you also a ripped-off process, what they did, and all the code names for it. So what happens is they end up shooting these sequences. And what's interesting is the field of pods becomes a cult classic, a system, a scene that never seen before, like the Jackson the Necks. Keep in mind, the Wachowskis said they wanted to do the Jackson the Neck for real in 1995 when they're talking about the science project. Well, if they wrote the piece, they don't have to worry about doing it for real. But they wanted to be given the science project so they could do the Jackson the Neck for real. They didn't conceive it. They're trying to get stolen property. So what's interesting is this thing is filled with 190 matchups. And what they did was, like we said, they lifted all the images, like Joe and I said, that they thought were cool and made a storyboard or had it made for them by artists they appreciated, anime artists and such like that. And then had this on site. Now, what's interesting if we look at the ending sequences of the Matrix story, which doesn't tie together, the trilogy. When you get to the end of the trilogy, it's interesting that you have a sequence of scenes. And those scenes exactly in here are the train station scene, the little girl, the family pushing her forward, like we talked about. And you've got this sequence where you have, the dome thing. They're looking for the dome, and Neo's is using the memories of the Smiths to find the dome. And what they didn't show is that actually in my piece, Neo is suffering, living the memories of the Smith character. He's actually living the very memories of the agent that he downloaded his program in order to access memories where the dome might be. So that's how he's blindfolded in their sequence, finding the dome. He's using the Smith memories. And what they show is Neo suffering, and Trinity holds his hand, and we know he's suffering, we can see he's suffering, we don't know why. In the screenplay, the original work here that the Copyright Office vouches for, preceding Matrix, you see that the Neo character, I named Jim, is actually suffering with accessing the memories of where the dome is by reliving also the memories of Smith enjoying murdering his family and seeing his daughter burn in flames as the house firebombed. And so that's what he's suffering from, but they don't show it. They keep shortcutting everything and dulling it down and making it not make sense, as Joe said. And so what happens at the ending sequence is exactly the same. Now, what's in the articles, fans of The Matrix will know that the Wachowskis kept saying, everyone kept telling us to blow up The Matrix. Okay, so they're shooting in 2003 in New Zealand, I believe it was, and they're finishing up. There's a lot of arguing on the set. You got the 20-foot rule that if you're within 20 foot of the Wachowskis, you're fired on site because they don't want anyone to see them consulting my script. That's what I'm told by attorneys. And so what happens is they're consulting the script, they're arguing how to end it, and that's why the Oracle's babbling and the A-team actors are trying to throw in their own stuff to try to make it make sense and improvising. And what happens is the Wachowskis are told, just blow it up. And they say, no, we want to keep it the way it is, which is the way my script runs. So the sequence of events is exactly the way I've written here, and anybody can go online and see them. With the train station scene, the identical figures at the crater, the one goes in, the pulse wave coming out, the earth turning green under the little girl, renewing her to life. The other girl, the girl coming in and hugging the Oracle and pointing at the sun. It's my baby. That's how I wrote it. They should have blown it up. If you take the image you think are cool from this screenplay, which is tight, and I'd have trouble even changing a scene around and throwing it out of whack. As the writer, I know that. Let alone picking all the scenes I thought was cool and then trying to make it fall together, rolling millions of dollars. Warner Bros. Is silly doing that. And so what happens is they insist on not blowing it up, saying everybody tells them to, keeps it the same as mine, and it makes no sense. In the ending, it makes no sense at all. And I would say to the Wachowskis right now, you should have blown it up. You should have followed the advice. If you're going to rip it off and lift what you think is cool from my work, blow the Matrix up. Your staff was right. You should have listened to them. Because now you left a big thumbprint. Besides all the inserts in these different films that are my personal bio information, including my exact birthday, you're doing the same matchup, Squiddies, Jack's the Neck, train station scene, the identical figures pointing at the sun. Guys, please. And what's interesting, too, is that in The Matrix, they list my birthday as July 22nd. When I was getting USA insurance recently, they accessed a document from 1996. They said it's the only document we could really find with your stats on it. Basically, it didn't exist. And on that, it says my birthday is July 22nd. Now, my birthday is July 2nd. So that's in 1999. They list what's on the 1996 records. In Animatrix, they list my birthday as July 2nd. They got it right then, which is interesting. They actually got it right the second time around, because then it was clear knowledge in that date that I was July 2nd. So even those errors, which I say is important for copyright law and arguing copyright law, are blatantly there, like the EMT device, the key being turned. If I rewrite my script, I wouldn't have the key anymore. And when I saw it in Matrix, I cringed. It's like it was a silly thing to do. So matchups after matchups, there's a lot more to the story, but I'll turn it over to Joe right now. But there's just so much to it that I could share, and I plan to, that goes beyond even this. But I want to give some of the hard, cold facts.
But what we want is eventually, we've done 5 radio shows with Tom, explaining a lot of this stuff, and this is part 2 of the Pot Talks that I've done. So this is the second one. Eventually, we're going to put them up on the internet, but so we need the audience to help us and fans to help us by download. When Tom puts these up, we want you to download them, copy them, and resend them out so that they can't shut this down. Because that's what they'll do is Tom puts them up, they'll go in with their bots and search engines and keep people from getting to it or erase it, so this information won't get out. But it's important that this information gets out, because this battle that Tom is fighting is about copyright protection. It's about people being able to protect their intellectual property. And like I said in the previous show, Paula put up 2,000 shows on YouTube, and she put it up under Paula Gloria. Then they turn around and say you can't use Paula Gloria anymore, which keeps her from accessing her intellectual property. In her name. And they say you now have to use, what was it, Paula? An email address. So now, if fans of Paula comment on any of her shows, Paula cannot get on to answer, to talk to the fans, and that's their way of controlling people's intellectual property. And they've gone even further by a lot of people who put up stuff on internet that contradicts what the mainstream media is saying. They now have it so they can shut them down. So let's say you punch a search that you're looking. Let's say we're talking about 9/11, and you punch in, what about 9/11? Well, some person who may have done serious research who can show that 9/11 was a false flag, they got bots that'll make sure that you don't go to that place, that you go to the mainstream media, to the propaganda. This is a battle that's very important. I mean, it's not just about Tom getting his rights to this stuff. It's about protecting the rights of all the people to their intellectual property. Paula wants to add something. Go ahead.
You were confusing what happened to me with Facebook. And what happened to me with Facebook is I had facebook.com/Paula Gloria. And pretty early in the game, they started to take this name, Paula Gloria, and made me Facebook.com, Paula Gloria 793, something like that. Well, I never had given a lot of energy to Facebook like I had to YouTube, so I didn't pay that much attention to it. But in these discussions that we've had with Tom over the past couple days, I realized that when an original content creator builds up an asset, whether it's real estate and you're building a house, or whether it's a website and you're building up traffic on a website, this is so similar, I believe, to what happened in Germany after World War II, when the German army was marched to death rather than go back home and get their farms or whatever. But so were the bureaucrats and intellectuals, the lawyers, usually a lot of Jewish people are in that. They probably too lost access to their, in this case, Paula Gloria name, and had to become Paula Gloria 793, i.e. the State of Israel. So I wouldn't want it to be construed that some of the things that Tom has said, that he's anti-Semitic, because he's absolutely not. And when you look deeply into the Matrix, what excites me about it is you see the potential for the coming together of all religions. Mm-hmm. Although you talk about a Christ figure, it's all religions.
Right, the intention was.
And right now, I would say much of the creation of the State of Israel is similar to me being pushed into Paula Gloria 793, where a lot of people probably had a gun to their head, were forced to go to another location and then pick up the blame. So it's not just that intellectual property is being stolen, it's also that the thieves are pinning the theft on the victims.
Mm-hmm.
That's my point.
That's right. And you're right. It was supposed to be a celebration of all faiths. If there's a code in the Matrix, it's about that the idea was, as an author, I was wanting to convey the idea, I celebrate your faith, not your religion. And the idea that religion can be controlled by the state and manipulated and used to divide people. But faith, if we celebrate each other's faith, we'll never be divided on one another. We'll celebrate that we do have faith in whatever form and whatever way our heart takes us along that faith journey. So that was one of the things that was meant to be as an idea in the Matrix, as well as a celebration of friendship, family, loyalty, devotion, things like that. And I did have an intention in this piece that I wanted to do. They always talk about the codes in the Matrix. The thing I intended was that I wanted to get an idea, like a beacon out there, where people might see this work. If it did become established and successful, as Bonaventura said, we're making it, then I wanted to have the idea that people might see it and feel called to come together, and that people from different disciplines and different faiths and different expertise with a heart and compassion would come together and form like a think tank kind of thing. So I did have this real hope that this piece would be kind of like a drawing device or instrument that people would see it and say, I see something in there. I also intended that it would be personal to each person. I wanted to bring audiences together. And Larry and Andy now claim that. They say it was written to draw people together, but we'll let them determine to self what it means. I intended that when people saw this, I left out a lot of the backstory on purpose that I put in the full story treatment. It was fully submitted in 1993. And the idea was that people put their own personal take and life experience into the story then to fill in those gaps. And then it becomes their own story. And I wanted audience to turn to each other and say, here's what I got, and here's what I got, and this is what do you think it meant? And in that, even in the ripped off version, I think it's been successful in getting people to write about it, wonder about it, determine what does it mean. But holding the copyright now, even though we could imagine Warner Bros. And their different ripped off people like Sony and Disney who ripped it off, are going to be throwing a bucket full of injunctions saying you can't do this, it's too similar. But then that draws the light back on the judge, who claimed there was no similarities whatsoever, the one that was picked to throw it out. And so people would, one of the biggest hands they play, and they've done this all along, is, oh, you lost, get over it. Well, what's interesting about this is, did we lose? The thing is that there was no due process. we never allowed certain evidence in. The attorney was provided us that was actually had a suspended license, first of all. Their lead attorney became his expert witness in a malpractice case. And also, Matrix was never claimed. Matrix has never been claimed in the court because Anthony Rankin, who was provided to me by Warner Brothers and the staff he had, didn't allow me to name it. So through no due process and through fraud, I never was able to name this case. Now I can name Matrix with all the inserts in it. And what's interesting is they made this claim in summary judgment. And for those that claim, well, you lost, get over it. The judge, they put it before the judge. They said, well, listen, he's not claiming Matrix 1. So therefore, anything that's in Matrix 1 can't be claimed in Matrix 2 and 3 in his suit. So the jacks of the neck, you can't claim it, all this stuff, which is interesting. They made actually this claim and the judge went with it, which means if it's never been claimed then, and you're not allowing it, we can claim it in the Matrix where the inserts are. We can claim the jacks of the neck, everything that's in my screenplay right here, the 190, we'll claim it. And we'll also claim Altered Carbon, which just came out.
Can you repeat that?
Sure. The idea was this. They argued that since I'm not claiming Matrix, they didn't allow me to. The provided attorney, Anthony Rankin, said, you can't claim Matrix. And I'm like, well, why not? You can't. Don't do it. And so even during depositions, he was asked by the other side, why didn't you claim Matrix 1? And I went to explain, my attorney said it, and he said, objection, he's not allowed to mention me. So I'm like, well, you're the reason I didn't claim it. So basically what happened was...
You're not allowed to mention that the lawyer, your lawyer...
Yeah.
That
He objected at my own deposition.
Lawyer
Yeah.
wouldn't let you mention...
That's right. I wasn't supposed to give an answer that included...
Repeat what I said because they don't hear me.
I wasn't allowed to mention that Anthony Rankin was the one that said I couldn't name the Matrix in the lawsuit. He said objected to anything saying why I didn't name the Matrix. I wasn't allowed to say it was him, which doesn't make any sense. That's the answer.
Well, it makes
But
a lot of sense.
yeah, so what's
Protect
yeah,
your lawyer.
that's right. And so what happens is,
Did you catch that, Joe?
Yeah.
and so what they're claiming is this. They're claiming since you didn't claim the Matrix with the jacks of the neck, any similarity in the Matrix can't be claimed in your suit dealing with 2 and 3. That makes no sense. That makes no sense.
No, you were cobbler.
That's right.
Hey, Joe, can you explain that? Because it's so important.
Well,
It is crucial.
it was the typical flim-flam that goes on in our courts all the time. We've done a lot of shows where we've tried to inform our audiences that we have not just corruption in politics. All our courts are corrupt, to try to get, especially if you go in as a pro se person, which I do quite often, and quite a few of my friends have. When you go in, the things that normally you should be allowed to do, they don't let you do. If you want discovery, they'll say, oh, you can only ask for X, Y, and Z, but you can't ask for A, B, C. So they tie your hands.
Right.
They set you up right from the start in these court cases to lose. You're there to lose. And until we wake up the American people to start standing up, and that's why I suggest people get behind this fight with Tom. This is a very important fight that he's doing. I've been there many times and watched not just myself but other friends how they railroad in courts. We need honest judges. We need judges that abide by the Constitution, that abide by Supreme Court rulings. Quite a few times in court cases, I've put in paperwork where I've cited the Constitution and I've cited Supreme Court rulings, and the judge will say, these are frivolous. Mm-hmm. Wait a minute.
They have no merit.
And they have no merit, right? Well, how can the Constitution and how can Supreme Court rulings have no merit?
Right.
Judges are just ruling like tyrants, and it's time for the American people to wake up and start demanding honesty in our court system, and a fair shake for people when they go in. Not that the rich and powerful get all the discovery they want, mm-hmm. and the pro se person or the little guy who's fighting doesn't get it,
That's right.
we're supposed to have equal protection under the law, not a slanted protection. And that's what we have in most of our courts. And when you look at what went on in Tom's court case, he was railroaded all the way. And Steve Romine, who just came in, he has a court case going against Central Hudson, Fortis, because of smart meters. And his case has been, the judge has ruled so many times against him, when the judge should have allowed him to get the discovery. They didn't allow it. And our friend George Conat, when he was in his court case, the other side got all the discovery they wanted, and the judge said, "Oh, George can't ask this question, or he can't ask this question," and those were critical questions that needed to be addressed. So our court system is so corrupt, folks. We need you people out there to start paying attention and start holding these judges' feet to the fire. It's not just our politicians that are corrupt. Our whole legal system is corrupt. And I'm begging you people, when Tom puts this stuff up on the internet, download it, his stuff, and pass it along to other people so that this can't be silenced. You want to add to any of that?
Yeah, I would say the price tag's too great. Without people getting involved, or with the mocking and the idea of heckling, "Oh no, the Wachowskis wrote it, you lost, get over it." The thing is, we suffer a great deal. I had 3 sons, I only have 1 left. 2 were murdered. And my wife is in bed with Mike Lang, the architect who was developed by Disney on acquiring. His actual title was executive for strategy to acquire intellectual property. So it's just incredible. Partners with Harvey and Bob Weinstein. So I have an email on my birthday when I was trying to see where was my wife, what happened to her, of actual email with Ziet Zion, Mike Lang's email, with his multi-million property shown in one picture, and then multi-million-dollar property. And then you have his bed with a shaving kit on it, and it says, "Becca," my wife's name, "move in with me for 60 days. And then it has a response from her, which is a blushing, smiling icon saying, "Very nice." So my birthday, my boy lost his mom. And the architect of the ripoff from the very beginning to take this property has the wife in bed, which is fine, good riddance. It showed us then that how Mike Lang was involved, and it showed us a trail through Hollywood, which he's probably going to have a head roll for. But the thing is that's what we do. We lose everything. We lose everything. They will destroy us, because intellectual property, what you're dealing with, instead of for prostitution, gambling, racketeering, whatever, they're taking a lot of risk and a lot of manpower and a lot of resources to make that happen. When you're dealing with ripping off a good script, if this is worth billions, as they said, then all you got to do is get rid of the one family. Then you don't have to look over your shoulder anymore, or call them crazy or deluded or things like that, or heckle them and shut them down and keep the public from getting involved. The greatest thing you can do is get behind us and help us. Do critical thinking. Look at the Matrix. Freeze frame that shot. Look at the Animatrix. Freeze frame that shot. Freeze it. Go to this. Look this up online. Matrix Redeemed. Study it. Look and see one. If you see one matchup, that means that judge was wrong and in fraud. It should have gone to trial. We had our deposition where I was deposed 7 hours, and the videographer and the stenographer got up in the middle, and they said at the break, and they said, "Tom, it's an honor to meet you." They said, "It's fascinating." That's indicative of how a jury will respond. Watch Andy and Larry, or Lana, or whatever the new name is for Andy as a girl. Watch them in their interviews. Watch them in the interview online about Bound, and see how they talk, and see if they seem scholarly or capable of writing these things. They were groupies of sci-fi, and they were drooling over the idea of being in the science project. Once they had their hands on the actual work and given green light to steal it, they picked the Matrix title in 1996. That's why there's no copyright on the title. And that's why Dino Laurentiis has the title of the Immortals copyrighted with no body of work. But the things, once it got in the Wachowskis' hands, in 1995, they go right out to Hollywood and buy a mansion. Even in the divorce case with Larry Wachowski, with Thea Bloom, she argues that you didn't create the Matrix story until 1995, 96, after our marriage, not your 92, 93 claim to try to top Tom. And so what's interesting is, even in the divorce case, they're saying, you didn't write this. You didn't get this until this time, after the marriage. And so it's amazing. You can see that online too, on Smoking Gun. So do critical research. Look into this. See if I'm a clown or a fraud. See if I'm telling the truth. Help my family out. I got one son left. 2 are murdered. My wife's in bed with Mike Lang, the architect, for stealing it. I don't want this to happen to other families. Please just read the work. If you see one similarity, then we're on our way and you could be a great help. Just one similarity means we go to trial, right? Exactly. Blocked it all, just threw it out. And the way the judge got around it, he didn't sign the order. And then what he did was he said it's not worth discussing the similarities because he didn't want to have to name Jack's the back of the neck, right? And so what's now is I heard from his clerk that he's willing to discuss with me. I'm allowed to send in a email. Last week I was informed that I can send an email in to open up a discussion or something or show him that he might reconsider. So he's got a little bit of a cold feet on this, while they point that he is definitely, he ruled that it's over, you lost, get over it. Yeah.
Okay, Tom. Well, we got to cut this off. And actually, I'm going to do another show on this because we didn't cover all the stuff that I wanted to cover. But I want you people out there to remember what we've been saying about how corrupt these courts are. So if you sit on a jury, always pay attention to what's going on and look to see if the other side, not the powerful, rich side, is the other side really getting a fair shake. And if they're not, we need juries to start being more aware. Pay attention if you're on a jury. And on that, I'm going to close this down and say goodnight. But we're going to do another show on this. We hope at some point in time that Tom's going to win his case against the thieves that stole his intellectual property and profited off it, so he can actually make the Immortals. And you people will get a chance to see how it all goes from beginning to end without any chops in between.